Please can we welcome to the stage Tom Ilube.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning. I'm told I've got 15 minutes and then I need to get off. So, so when there's about 5 minutes to go, if you can all shout 5 minutes, get off. I'm going to talk fast because I haven't got a lot of time and I want to share some things with you. I want to talk to you about what it's like being a role model and the journey to get there. And then I want to share 5 tips with you that I suppose in my career have helped me along the journey. But I should say something about what was mentioned there. They said I was told that I was the most powerful black person in the UK. And I said to my wife, do you know I'm the most powerful black person in the UK? And she said, you're not even the most powerful black person in this house. So, so I don't get too carried away by that. But I have done some things. So I'm an entrepreneur. I start companies. I think of an idea. I go and raise money. I build a company. I'm an early stage entrepreneur. So I start with a blank sheet of paper. I build the company. I sell the company. I retire. I unretire. I do it again. I do it again. I've done it about 6 times now. I've probably raised, 50 to 100 million in venture money to build my companies, and I'm still doing it. My latest company is called Crossword Cybersecurity. It's a cybersecurity company listed on the AIM stock exchange, and it's going on a great journey. I've been doing that for a while. I also sit on a few boards. I was on the board of the BBC for just under 5 years. I'm on the board of WPP, the world's largest advertising agency. We have 110,000 staff across the world in about 130 countries. The company's valued at the order of 10 billion, so I get to see that. I'm also the chair of England Rugby, the RFU, one of the UK's biggest sports, and the first black chair of one of the major sports in the UK. The other thing that I do is that I do philanthropy and I set up schools. That's my thing, education. I founded Hammersmith Academy. I was involved in founding the Darwin Academy up in Lancashire. I was on the board of Lillian Baylis Technology School, and I set up the African Science Academy in Ghana, which is one of the first all-girls science and technology academies in the continent. And we're trying to grow that to have 10,000 young women go through the school by the end of the decade. So that's what I spend my time doing. Now, because of these things, people think of me as a role model. I haven't gone out of the way myself to think of myself as a role model, and it was quite difficult at a certain point in my career when people started to kind of relate to me as a role model. But then I decided that I would just kind of relax into it, because I think that if people find it useful to take things from my experience and it helps them move forwards, then I think that's a valuable thing. And having people like me, black men, black women, senior black men and women in these spaces, in these rooms, making decisions, it does let you know that that's something that anyone here can do. And I think what's important in being a role model is to be accessible. Sometimes people can say, oh, Tom, you are I'm the fellow of 2 Oxford colleges, of St. Anne's College and Jesus College. I've got 4 honorary doctorates and so forth. So people can kind of think, oh my goodness, you've done all this stuff. It's kind of unattainable. And therefore, I think it's quite useful for me to be able to say, well, actually, the first year of my life was in foster care. I lived in the UK, I lived in Uganda, I lived in Nigeria, I lived back in the UK, I ran away from home when I was 14, I did this, that, and the other. Just like anyone else, I went to a university none of you will ever have heard of. I got a 2-2 degree, I hustled my way here and there. So, it's useful, I think, for me to tell that sort of story so that people kind of say, oh, well, if you can come from that sort of background and get to where Tom's got to, then anyone can do it. And really, anyone can do it. And there are 5 things that I want to share with you that have helped me on my journey, and I've probably learned along the way. The first, which I'll come back to at the end, is about dreaming and how to have a dream that will propel you forwards. And then it's about acting fast. And I use fast as the way to remember the things that really matter to me. The first is failure. F is for failure. In my experience, there is no way to get to success without passing through failure. I often find young people seem to be scared of failure or worried about it. What if I try and do this and I fail? I do not care at all. It doesn't mean that I don't like, that I like failure. It's just that I don't worry about it at all. When I first came back to the UK and I was looking for jobs, there was this huge directory called the Computer Users Yearbook. It had thousands of names of companies in it, all of which had computer departments. And I thought, wow, this is easy. I will just apply to all of them. So I started at the letter A, and I applied to every company in England that began with the letter A. And every company in England that began with the letter A said, no, go away. I used to apply, then it was letters, it wasn't emails. You'd apply with letters, so I'd write letters, and I would send out the letters, and the postman would come back with the rejections. He stopped putting them through the letterbox. He would just ring the doorbell and just pass me my rejections, and I would pass him the next batch of, And when I finally got a job, there was literally no one happier than the postman. I once applied to the same company 5 times. I applied to this company, they rejected me. I said, good, lines of communication are open. I applied again, they rejected, applied again. The 4th time I applied, they sent me a letter, and it said, dear Mr. Ilube, please can you call the European head of HR? And I said, this is good, you see. I've worn them down. I phoned her, and she said, Mr. Ilube, you don't have the right qualifications. You don't have the right experience. We will never offer you a job. I waited 2 weeks and applied again. I don't care. I do not care at all. If I'm trying to raise money, I will pitch to 100 people, and 99 will say no, and 1 will say yes, and I only care about the one that says yes. So there's that resilience that failure is just nothing for me. I will go and go and go. Everyone else will give up. One of my nieces came and said she wants to work in, I think it was the museum sector. And I said, oh, cool. Have you applied to every museum in London? And she said, no. And I said, well, go and apply to every museum in London. And then I didn't hear from her for a month or so, and I caught up with her at a family thing, and I said, how's it going? And she said, oh, I got a job. I said, yeah, that's kind of how it works. So failure, that's my relationship with failure. The second thing in FAST is ambition. I am very ambitious, but I found a trick quite early on. I separate ambition from the path to get there. A lot of people conflate the two. They say, I want to be a banker at Goldman Sachs, and I say, for what? What's the ambition? And then that's one path, but I tell you, there are 10 other paths. So figure out where you're trying to get to and get really attached to that. But don't get attached to the path. If that path isn't open to you, another path is. If that one isn't open, another path is. So be very flexible on the route, on the path, but be very clear on what the ambition is. So I've always done that. I do not get attached to the path. I get very attached to the goal, and I keep my focus on the goal, and I'm very flexible about the path. The third thing, the S in FAST, is storytelling. You have got to get good. I had to get good at telling my story. There's this lovely proverb that I use and I quote over and over again, which says, until lions have their own storytellers, tales of the hunt will always favor the hunter. Until you tell your own story, other people will tell it for you. So you have got to get good at telling your story. And there are 2 things about that. One is your pitch, and second is practice. You have got to have a pitch. You've got to have 3 pitches, in fact. You've got to have your 30-second pitch. If you meet me outside and say, hello, Tom, can I tell you about myself? And I say, yeah. At that moment, you have 30 seconds, that's all. What are you going to say in that 30 seconds that is going to make me say, we should spend some time together? You don't start thinking of that in the moment. It's not there and then that you start thinking, what should I say, what should I say? You've thought of it as you're here. You should know right now, if I grab you and say, tell me about yourself, what are the 30 seconds that you're going to tell me that will make me think, wow, we should talk? That's key. You've got to have that pitch. You've got to have the 5-minute pitch. If we sit down for 5 minutes and we talk, what are you going to say? That's going to be different to your 30 seconds, but it's still going to be there. And you've got to have your half-hour pitch. If we have a coffee and we're really talking it through, what are the things we're going to talk about? Your 30 seconds, your 5 minutes, your 30 minutes. You've got to have that. And then you've got to practice. The last time I was on this stage, I hadn't realized it was the same stage, was for a TEDx talk. And I did a TEDx talk, 6-minute talk, I think it was. And people said, oh, that was quite a good talk, really good talk, and so forth. And I said, yeah. And they said, it seems so natural, you just sort of flow. And I said, yeah, I flow. But, but I had practiced that talk 50 times, 50. I practice and I practice. I come home, my wife will be upstairs and she'll come down and I say, oh, good evening. And I said, just stop it, leave me alone. I literally practice that 6-minute talk 50 times. I'm always amazed when people say, oh, I'm just going to wing it. Why? You've got this moment and you're going to wing it. Why would you do that? You practice. You practice in front of the mirror. If I say something funny and you laugh, it's because I practiced in the mirror and I laughed. And even that, I practice. So storytelling, really key. And then the final thing is teamwork. You will not get to where you want to be without being part of a team. It is impossible. And therefore, you need to understand the dynamics of teams. You need to understand that every team will go through form, storm, perform. When your team is storming, you don't panic about it. That is just literally what teams do, and that is perfectly fine. And you need to understand yourself. If you're an introvert, then you need to team up with extroverts. If you're a big picture person, you need to team up with details people. If you're a very structured person, you need to team up with spontaneous people. So you need to look at yourself, understand yourself, in order to understand what team is going to come together to achieve that goal. That is really, really key. I said I would come back to dreaming. You need to have a big dream, but there's a way to dream. And there's a quote that I really like, and I often use when I think about dreaming, and it's from T.E. Lawrence, and it says this: all dream, but not equally. Those who dream by night, in the dusty recesses of their minds, awake to find it was vanity. But the dreamers of the day are dangerous, for they may act their dreams with open eyes to make it possible. So we need to dream big, but we need to be dreamers of the day, and we need to dream with open eyes so that we can act our dream and act fast in order to make it possible. Thank you.
That was brilliant. Thank you so much, Tom. Very insightful. I love that read at the end as well. It was good, wasn't it?
Really, really good.
We're loving it back there. You're like, this is the show. You want to see the show back there. Great time. Okay, so now we would like to welcome our panelists to the stage.
Yeah, for sure.
Yes. So we'll start off with Natasha Shotunde, co-founder and chair at Black Barristers Network. So Natasha is an award-winning barrister at Garden Court Chambers, where her work encompasses family law and human rights. In 2019, Natasha founded the Black Barristers Network, BBN, with Mavis Oniwinde-Agoro to provide support professionally and socially and increase the visibility of Black barristers within and outside of the legal profession. Please put your hands together for Natasha.
Up next is Renee Hunt. She has been part of the tech industry for over 30 years and has built her career delivering high-quality software engineering in commercial organizations. She's earned a bachelor's degree from Penn State University. She holds an MBA from the University of Texas at Austin and is a veteran of the US Army Signal Corps.
Ooh.
Very good.
So next up, Tim Campbell, who is the marketing director for financial services education company, thezishi.com. Here he is.
Round of applause, thank you.
He established a groundbreaking charitable foundation and is currently chairs an outstanding school board. Tim has also been appointed as the latest advisor to Lord Alan Sugar on the BBC One show, The Apprentice.
Amazing.
That's where you recognise him from,
good.
yeah.
Really, really good, yeah. Up next, Baroness Lola Young, Chancellor of the University of Nottingham. Lola Young has been, round of applause, has been an independent crossbench member of the House of Lords since 2004 and has founded and co-chairs all-party parliamentary groups on the ethics and sustainability in fashion and sports, modern slavery and human rights. Lola is now co-chair of the Foundation for Future London, Chancellor of the University of Nottingham, and a non-executive director of Bloomsbury Publishing and Futera. And finally, host and founder of the BYP network, Kike Oniwinde-Agoro.
So please enjoy the panel. Obviously, continue to scan the QR code for any of your questions, and we'll see you in about 45 minutes. Enjoy.
Thank you. Thank you all so much for joining us on our first panel session on the main stage. Can we get a round of applause? Amazing. So we just heard from Tom Ilube, and he gave us 5 lessons in leadership. So I'd love to hear from each one of you on your #1 lesson in leadership and why. So let's start with Baroness Young.
Okay. Thank you. I should be able to project without a microphone, but I'll do it anyway. So yes, I'm going to smuggle in a couple and say it's about listening, having humility actually, and being very open. I would say those are 3 of the key things I think are really important to be a leader, and also to recognize other people's strengths and their areas for development, and to encourage and ensure that your legacy is a whole generation, a whole cohort of people who are able to lead. It's not necessarily in obvious leadership positions. So I smuggled in about 25 there, but there you go.
That's fine.
Yeah, I think a leader is an honor. And in order to really do it justice, you have to be constantly learning, because the assumption is that a leader is omnipotent, knows everything, and never fails. Absolutely ridiculous. So always constantly learning. And following on from Baroness's beautiful articulated 25 point, is the 26th one I would say, is you should have the ambition to leave the people that you are leading better than you saw them in the first place. So making sure that you're passing on so they actually supersede you and their own limitations, because that's, I think, is the beauty of leadership.
Hi, everyone. For me, leadership, I believe very deeply, is in the servant leadership. And so it's my job to make sure that the people that I have the privilege to lead have what they need so that they can do their very best work and they can be their best and most authentic selves. So that's #1, and taking my cues. #2 is to be a good leader, you should be mentored and you should mentor other people.
I hope this mic is working. Wonderful. Hi, everyone. I think for me, the #1 thing you need to be a leader is to believe in yourself. Because if you don't believe in yourself, then how are you going to lead yourself or lead other people? I think with that, I understand it's quite difficult, especially at the beginning when you're starting out. You're new, your knowledge may be limited. However, it's important to sort of build that self-confidence. Saying all of that, though, being a leader and believing in yourself is not believing yourself blindly. It's not being cocky. It's not being arrogant. You need to have the confidence to know when you need to ask for help. You need to have the foresight to know your strengths, your weaknesses, to get that knowledge, or to acquire somebody else's skills in order to get that knowledge and know how to delegate tasks. So that would be my top tip.
Amazing, thank you. We got about 20 there, so, pick and choose. I just want to go straight to Baroness Young. So I'm actually an alumni of the University of Nottingham, so it feels amazing to have you here. When I was actually at university, I remember thinking there wasn't that many Black people in my course or on campus in general. And I remember when we graduated, not many people got the 2-1 and above. And I found a stat online that said there's a disparity of about 18.6% of Black students not getting the grades. How does that stat sound to you? And what is, I guess, University of Nottingham and other universities doing about that?
Yeah, it's a big question and a very important one. And as always with these issues, it's multifaceted, okay? So there's no point in saying if we just do this one thing, everything's going to be okay, because it doesn't work like that. And everybody has to make a concerted effort, A, to be asking the right questions so that we can identify what the issues are, and B, to work really hard on the solutions. So to your point about the disparity in the awarding of grades, and I think it's better to say, there's an awarding gap rather than an attainment gap, because attainment gap makes it sound like it's all Black people's fault, whereas actually it's, again, as I say, multifaceted. So yeah, unfortunately, that statistic you quote is correct, is my understanding. I got on my little iPad a whole heap of other statistics as well, equally shocking.
Let's hear 'em.
So for example, it says 1% of university professors are Black, but actually that's a rounded up number. It's 0.7%. So you would hardly register, and that was the case when I was made a professor. It hardly registered that there were 2 black women professors because the number was so small out of all the professors in the country. There are 41 black women professors out of 22,000.
Oh my God.
So that's 0.2. And then at the University of Nottingham, we have the honour of having the first black chemistry professor, Robert Makaya, whom I met a few weeks ago. So he was made a chemistry professor in Nottingham in 2007. He was the first. He's still the only. He's still the only black chemistry professor in this country. Science, it seems, has a particular problem. I'm not excluding humanities and arts, but around science, there seems to be a particular problem, and there has been some publicity around that recently.
Yeah. And look, we hate hearing statistics like this, and this is why the conference is here. We're trying to empower people to become leaders of the future. So kind of what is your advice for those here today to step into these positions so that in 2030, as part of our decade of proactive change, the stats will be different?
Yeah, well, it's difficult because I think it's both a long-term and a short-term thing. So we have to say, it is going to take probably decades to get to parity. But by the same token, we have to be really impatient and say we need to act and act now. And there has been some movement. I mean, it's at a glacial pace because what we've all known sort of internally has now become a fact. It's become, we've got the evidence to show that. So recognize the evidence, provide leadership. We've all given hints to people about what leadership is. So, anybody from the universities or higher education sector, there's plenty of resources out there telling you what the problem is and all the different ways in which you need to address it. But primarily, it's about the curriculum, it's about the students and having a sense of openness and belonging in institutions that says you're welcome here. Not just, everybody's welcome here, but you in particular are welcome here. It's about the makeup of the staff. And again, you have to take you have to take actions in order to address that. So, for example, I know that in some areas in the private sector, you will have applications for jobs where you don't see the name. So so you have that blank. So you're not, the people who are making the selection aren't unconsciously biased against people with certain kinds of names. That's one way of doing things. But I mean, there's loads of advice and help and support and guidance out there, not least from other sectors that are also going through the same thing, because although this is incredibly important in the university sector, it's not our problem or not our issue alone. So it's about staffing, it's about students, it's about curriculum, it's about the way in which the institution presents itself and acknowledging that some things are really, really difficult for people. So I know that when I started out, the idea of walking into a room that's full of these hyper-educated, mostly privately educated males who are white, and I'm sort of thinking, how do I go into that room? We've got to make sure that people understand that they must come into that room. They must be sitting at that table and they must be leading around that table. So, without going into concrete specifics, as I say, there's lots, the Universities UK, which is the umbrella organisation for universities, has issued guidance. We at Nottingham are trying to institute a strategic plan which sees people taking direct responsibility for making this better so that the colleagues are accountable for what happens on their watch.
Yeah. And what does being a chancellor actually mean? And how do, again, everyone in this room become a chancellor? We all want to be chancellors in the future.
Okay. Come and be a chancellor and all of the other roles. But before I say a bit about that, I would like to say that often when we talk about achievement, we talk about role models, there's this assumption that it always has to be at the top of the hierarchy, right? My view, you can be a leader at any level, and that we must stop thinking that the only really great role models are people who become chancellors, members of the House of Lords, chief executives, et cetera, et cetera. We need to recognise the strength, the power, the talent, the innovation across our communities. So that's really important. But having said that, we do need people in those roles. So to me, a chancellor's role is kind of what you make it. There's no job description for a chancellor. The only part that is more or less essential is handing out degrees to graduates. And I can tell you that's the most joyful thing to do. I love that bit of it. It's 3,000 handshakes. I don't care. It's fine. But seriously, I think you're there to almost be like an ambassador for the university. So when I had a conversation with my vice chancellor about taking on this role, I said there are certain things that I'd want to see happening, certain things that I'd want to be involved in, certain things that I'd like this organization to be doing. And that's how I would approach the role. So if you're fine with that and you're going to make those efforts in those areas, then I'm fine with actually being an ambassador for the organization. So I think that's a kind of general way of summing up what you do. I do lots of lectures and go to conferences and talk with students and see what's going on at the university. And that's, as I say, a delightful role.
Amazing, thank you. And I want to go over to Tim. So as you heard, Tim was the first ever apprentice winner. So it might be a while ago. Let's clap again for that. You know?
Please, no.
I know Tim is like, that's old news. You know, you've achieved so much since then. But I do want to talk about that because what gave you the confidence when you were on that show to know that, you know, I'm going for gold. I'm going to win this show?
It's really interesting. When we talk about our lived experience, the necessity of that moment for me was what propelled me to go and take that particular route. But I make it clear that I don't think, and I think there's a responsibility with that, I don't think that that's a route that everybody should take, because those particular set of circumstances where I was living in a one-bedroom flat with a 2-year-old child, that meant that I would take huge amounts of risk. The difficulty that I have now is many of the conversations I have with individuals, if we took better investment on the decisions that we made earlier, I wouldn't have had to take that huge risk with a massive payoff. Don't get me wrong, I'm incredibly proud and very, very fortunate, but it was an unnecessary risk if I'd have taken wiser decisions beforehand. So as an individual now with children, my daughter just passed a driving test the other day, which is scary in its own right? But I feel that I have a responsibility to tell my child, as I would anybody else in terms of mentees and whatever, that is not the pathway you should take. What was important about the experience was having the confidence to step forward in the first place. Now, put your hands up if you think you're confident. Really interesting. So the vast majority of people didn't put their hands up, right? And there's no right or wrong answer to this. But confidence is situational. Confidence is not something you are born with. It's not a DNA right or a trait or something that others are having that you don't have. In a situation where I was shaking people's hands as a chancellor, or being the CTO advising a board around exactly what it should do, or standing in front of a judge with regards to being a barrister, all of those things, I would be absolutely wetting myself if I had to have the opportunity to do so. But when I go into my organization and I'm raising money, or I'm helping people start their businesses, or we're talking about financial trading at the Z-Sheet, I can do that with my eyes closed. It's situational. And what you have to do in order to step into whatever your power is make sure you do the research and learn, back to that point about leadership, learn your craft, find something you're incredibly passionate about and invest into that, because the more you learn, you get rid of the thing that scares most people, which is the unknown. Once you've experienced and gone through it, you can do it much better. Then, when you've got a clarity of focus, and I always tell people, what do you spend most time doing? Because your mum and dad might, or your parent or guardian may have told you, go to university, be the doctor, get the qualifications that will make me proud to tell Jennifer and Joe next door what you do, right? But actually, if your heart's not in that, that's a huge investment in something that's not going to make you happy. And in life, I know I have got the most reward, whether that's financial or from a mental well-being perspective, when I'm doing stuff that makes my heart happy. And you really have to think about what is making your heart happy, because your 9 to 5 should be giving you a glee that means that you don't think about the time. Now, you can live to work, and that's fine, and then use your money and invest and do other stuff. But I would love to find a holy grail where you're working to live. And for me as a leader, I'm really fortunate that I'm able to do that, where I benefit people, whether they're in my teams or the clients that purchase our products and services, and I make them happy, which makes me happy. So really invest into the fact that you've got to overcome the bits you don't know, get the confidence to walk into it and find things that make you happy. That's where confidence comes from.
Amazing. And I know Tom spoke about failure earlier, and a lot of people do have a fear of failure, but we don't talk enough about fear of success. Some people don't want to step into their power and step into their shine because they're afraid of being in the spotlight or having that pressure. Again, how did you combat that? You stepped into this, big title and you've excelled since, but how did you combat that fear of success?
Yeah, I can't lie because my missus will see this, right? And she was like, Tim, you weren't afraid enough of it. I had to Vaseline my head to get through the door sometimes, right? But I make no bones that I'm confident about what I do. I'm really comfortable. If you give me a problem, I'm going to find a solution, right? So I'm really driven to solve problems. A motivating thing for me is that if somebody's upset in my life or something's broken, I naturally gravitate to want to fix it. In a marriage, gentlemen and those who get into certain situations, sometimes it's not always right to solve stuff. Sometimes you just have to listen. That's a free piece of game that I'll just give for those who are in there, right? But essentially, and I've messed up enough to know that it's important, right? But my skill set is about solving problems. I'm comfortable with doing that. If you aren't comfortable or understand what you should do, work with lots of people, try lots of stuff, see what gives you that happiness in terms of what you want to do. I think the thing that I'm most frustrated by, though, is that we have to realize that individuals from the global majority of communities in a minority environment, where you are seen as a minority, you have to be aware that, forget this whole thing around code switching and imposter syndrome. I think it's about masking. My mum had the ability to pick up the phone after cussing me in the broadest patois and speak the best Queen's English that you could ever imagine, right? So I learned from a very early age the power of masking in certain situations. And that can be encouraging because you learn how to be flexible, but also it can be really, really debilitating in understanding that you can't always be who you are, right? So I think we have to be aware that in certain situations, we have to flex. And that is a stressor and a strain on us that we can't take for granted, or it can't be seen as insignificant. So just be aware that when you are stepping into the rooms and the conversations that you're having, try to be as authentic as you possibly can, but feel the room that you're walking into to understand how the power dynamics of that room can be utilized to your own environment, because work is a game.
Yeah.
It's a game. And sometimes that game can be pleasant and sometimes it can be combative, right? You have to be aware, what games do you want to play in order to get to those upper echelons, because sometimes it's not just about being the best, it's about playing the game better. And that's a reality that lots of people don't want to talk about, because meritocracy is lovely, but sometimes I'm seeing the people up in different situations and I know they're not the best. No, they're not the best.
Yeah. And, just on that, there are gatekeepers, right? And there are people who are not sending the ladder back down, or people who, they might be in a position of leadership and feel like I got there on my own, so others should get there on their own. But you're someone who, you mentor a lot of people. Kind of, what's your advice to others to send that ladder back down?
I think first get to... There's a tendency for people from underserved communities to want to help everybody immediately. And the cliche that I always go back to is that when you're traveling on a plane, the captain gives you the best piece of advice firsthand. Put your mask on first before you help anybody else. And it sounds really, really selfish, but I'm able to help people because I've got a platform. I couldn't have helped people to the same level or capacity while I was trying to help myself. I'm not saying you have to be selfish and you can do things concurrently, but I think it's important to be relatively selfish at the beginning, to say, let me get to a position where I've got something to give, and then I can help more people. That doesn't mean you have to ignore people on the way or kick people or step on their heads, but you have to be relatively selfish, because if you run out of oxygen because you've given all of your energy to somebody else, you don't live your full potential. And your first and foremost thing, I think, is to live and maximize your potential, because you do not know who you are going to impact, touch, help, or assist once you get to that particular platform. Along the way, hold people's hands, give them advice, but you have to make sure that you are looking after yourself as much, if not more so, than you are helping other people.
Amazing, thank you. And so let's go on to Renee. So Renee and I actually met in 2018 when I was a Sky Woman in technology. So this is all full circle, having Sky sponsor. And, Renee's over at Compare the Market as a CTO, which we just have to clap for. That's amazing. Tell us, Renee, about the journey, these last 4 years, how the opportunity came about and how you felt, kind of the emotions and, how you felt before you took the opportunity.
Honestly, I call the last year, and in 12 days, I will celebrate my 1-year anniversary with the wonderful company that is Compare the Market. I'd be remiss to say Compare the Market exists to make financial decision-making a breeze for everyone, which is an amazing purpose to get behind. And as I age, yes, I'm aging, it's important to to go to work. And I love what you said about live to work and finding a place where that toil doesn't feel like toil because you're skipping going in. And I can honestly say in 36 years, I have a job where I'm skipping going in.
Wow.
And, I don't think I ever thought I would work in financial services. I've actively avoided working in financial services because it doesn't connect with my values. So to find a company that only makes money when we save other people money, that connects with my values. I'm like, okay. Because I tell you what, never did I wake up ever saying what I really want to do is work in insurance in Peterborough. Right? Like, I worked for Sky. I worked in media, darling. Right? I looked at news and sports, and it was glamorous, and we had, was it Sizzle? I miss Sizzle. Sizzle reels before everything. And I was like, no, this is not happening. So let's stop rambling. How did I get there? It's an important point about career, and I truly did not ever plan to be a CTO. I've worked in tech my whole career. I've enjoyed it immensely. I find the challenge of working in engineering, working with code, solving problems, like personally and professionally quite satisfying. I find the challenge of working with largely men on the spectrum really challenging and satisfying. And I love the magic of what we do every day. So that's the weird geeky part of me. But equally, I was like, never, and I think it's about something about recognizing limits, right? And how hard you want to push against those limits. So I'm 57, and I grew up with all the ceilings, right? And so I wouldn't say I had low expectations, but I was quite pragmatic about what success would look like for me. And after a while in the corporate world, I decided that I like to do this thing. I want to do this thing. I don't want to work for people I don't want to work for. I don't want to do things I don't want to do. And I want to get paid well. How can I navigate that? I stopped caring about the title. I stopped caring about the perks and the corporate politics. Kept my head down and said, how can I navigate just doing the stuff I enjoy the most, which is software delivery, continuing to be paid well? So I went single shingle for a long time, and in that journey, I met Sky. And I worked for Sky as an independent for many years. And in there, I started to meet people who I would call sponsors. So people who would speak my name in other rooms, hear a problem and say, you know who we need to get? We need to get Renee, because she's crazy, and she'll probably say yes. And they would say some crazy thing they wanted to do, and I'd go, wow, that's madness. Okay, I'm in. Seriously, I actually said that in an interview. And I did things that I think to other people looked like risk, but I knew that was my skill set, and it's likely not gonna work, but they already know that. So I'm gonna give it my best shot. Often we could make it work. I got the tick, and then the next time those sponsors would call me. Fast forward, I take a job with Sky. Truly one of the most challenging things I've ever done in my life was to be an employee again, where I didn't call my own shots. I had to do with corporate politics. My sponsor quit within 6 months of me joining, and I was like, oh. And I had a team of people in Leeds who didn't know me from Adam, and yeah. So we had a great time. We did wonderful things in technology, raised a bunch of people, personally tripled the number of women in leadership in tech, personally did that. And I got to a point where I was ready to change roles. Now, Sky is a massive company with lots of opportunities, so I was sniffing around saying, well, what next? What am I gonna do next? And at that time, I got a call from one of those sponsors who had gone on to work for Compare the Market. And he said, hey. And I was like, no, we're not doing this. He goes, no, just take the call. So I took the call. Several interviews later, I'm sitting with an offer going, do I leave, do I not leave? And I said, okay, I like to take risks, so yes, I'll give it a go, right? Besides which, I had quit Sky 3 times. I knew they'd take me back. So I said, okay, fine, I'm gonna go. So I took a role as the director of product engineering, and I'm gonna be really clear. I knew I could do that job. I had no worries at all. So as confidence being situational, definitely the situation where I was extremely confident. One eye closed. My motivation was, it'll be fun, right? They're gonna pay me well. It'll be nice to be in a different kind of atmosphere, right? And the culture at Compare the Market is unbelievable, like I can't believe that it's a technology company because everybody is so flipping nice, right? Like honestly. So we go to work there, everything's fine. I spend 90 days just shy of 90 days, getting to know people, building my network, listening a lot, engaging where I felt like we were about to do self-harm, figuring out how I can add value in this role. After Christmas, the CTO and the CEO booked a meeting for me to prepare and show them my plan for the engineering department. And they said, yeah, 1 minute on that. And at that point, they said, we would like you to be the CTO because the CTO currently, my sponsor, would be leaving. That's twice he did that to me, twice. When I heard the good news as to why he was leaving, I was so excited congratulating him. I missed the first part. I missed the part where they said, we'd like you to be CTO. And I'll be 100% honest with you. My first gut reaction was, hell no. Like, no. And I still feel the emotion of that. Not because of imposter syndrome. I'm going to be really clear on this. Because of know thyself syndrome. I had created a narrative in my own head that this is what I do. This is where my situational confidence sits. I have great respect for the CTOs I've met in my past who are amazing at that job. And I looked at them and I said, amazing, but not me. And more importantly, I have no ambition for that. And I call my shots in my life. And then I went and spoke to my mentors. So after I said no, and they said, no, really, we need you to do this. And I said, I need to think about it. And the CEO, bless him, he was like, see, that's why I want you for the job, because I knew you would say that. And I said, I said, this is not a game. I need to think about it. So why did I feel that way? One, I needed to talk to my mentors, and I'm so privileged to I thank my younger self for having the sense to find mentors for whom their only motivation is to help me. There is nothing in it for them. Absolutely, positively, 100% nothing. But they help me. And they've known me for a long time. So I went and spoke to some of them. And that was really good counseling, really good counseling. My husband is jumping up in the background saying, you are definitely taking that job. And I said, no, I need to think about it. And my challenge was the fear of failure. That was a big stage. There are not a lot of black CTOs. There are not a lot of black women CTOs, and I know myself. And I thought, this is too much. It's too much to carry that and a job where I'm going to spend 50% of my time learning on the job, right? Learning on the job. So it took me about a week and a half. And I said yes.
Let's just get a clap for the yes.
And I don't regret it. I don't regret it. I wish I would have been keeping a journal on my first week in the job, because everything that could possibly go wrong that had nothing to do with my decisions or other people's decisions went wrong. And it was, trial by fire. And the worst one was, after a series of nonsense, my CISO, and it's the job of a CISO to be paranoid, by the way, but he looked at me, and he's a very large Welsh man, and he was so pale, and I said, Tony, are you all right? And he goes, I have never seen a cyber attack of this intensity. And I went, okay. And he went, that's not the reaction I was expecting. And I said, oh, honey, I worked at Sky. That was called every single day. So that what I'm prepared for. I'm actually qualified to engage in that conversation.
Thank you, Renee.
Yeah, great.
Let's get another round of applause. Thank you so much. And I want to go on that for Natasha, just to kind of talk about the fear of failure, imposter syndrome. I know you've spoken openly about that. It'd be great to kind of hear some of your coping techniques and why others in the room shouldn't have imposter syndrome.
Okay, so as you all know, I'm a barrister, and therefore I decided to go into a profession that is seen as the elite profession, full of male, pale, and stale.
Nothing against allies.
Everywhere. So, growing up, young black girl from Tottenham, single parent family, etc., etc. Looking into the profession that I was looking into was very alien to me, but it was something that I always just wanted to do. However, through that, surprisingly, I was a very shy child. I suffered from low self-esteem, from low self-worth, from feeling that I was unlovable, from feeling that my words were words that no one would be interested in because I wasn't smart enough, that I was stupid, etc., etc. However, for some reason, I still decided to go into this profession where my words are powerful, they are necessary, I have to be highly intelligent, I have to be fantastic, I have to look good in a gown and a wig, all of that. So how did I do it? My mom always told me that the world is my oyster, so long as I put my mind to something, I can do it, etc. So I was just gunning for it. However, during the journey of trying to become a barrister, I really had to tackle those beliefs that I had about myself that I didn't even realize I had, because it was just so damaging. It was affecting everything. It made me feel like I wasn't good enough for the job, that I was going to be found out to be a failure. I had to pretend to be somebody that I was not me. I was speaking the Queen's English. I was there trying to talk about cricket. Do I know about cricket? I even went skiing, people. I went skiing. Can you imagine? So the first thing I did was to learn to love myself. So when I look back at the times when I was going through university, I was going through the application process, I was going through bar school, I actually really hated myself.
Wow.
And for me, I felt like if my own father could abandon me, then clearly there was something wrong with me. And I really had to tackle that. Having my mum raising me on her own, seeing her struggle, made me feel like I was a burden. And even to this day, sometimes I do feel that way. Wow. So I had to really dig deep. I did counseling. I recommend it for everybody, especially for the men that I'm in the age groups that I'm trying to date, but that's another story. That's why you can't see the ring.
We're not all like that, though. We're not all like that, yeah? Let me make that clear.
Natasha is around, everyone.
And through that, I had to sort of recognize that those are the core beliefs that I had, find out where they were from, untangle them, and start to sort of fill my own cup up. Tell myself the real stories of what's happening, not my father abandoned me because of me. It was because he was whatless. I'm talking to him now. He's not watching this. It's okay. And just really sort of pour some love into myself, to the extent that, during the pandemic, I would look at myself in the mirror and I'd be like, Tasha, you look great today. You look fantastic. Just bigging myself up. I think the second thing I did was making sure that I was being myself. And that stems from loving yourself. Once you start to learn about yourself, you start to love yourself, it becomes easier to be yourself. And I think that's extremely important. I completely agree with what you said about being yourself and having a look at the room and making sure that, the self that you're bringing out is the best self for the situation that you're in. I'm not saying fan man, the rest of them, when I'm in court, for example. But it's really important to be yourself. An example of how being myself worked was I did my my interview for pupillage. It was the last interviews that I had had that year. And this is after 3 rounds, 3 years of trying to apply for it. And therefore, because it was the last lot and I had failed the others, I decided I wasn't going to get this. I was going to take a gap year and actually work a bit and then travel. So I went into the interview and I was literally completely relaxed. I was busting jokes. They were laughing. There was the rapport, and then they ended up getting pupillage from them. So definitely be yourself. I think also acknowledge your own achievements. You may think that you haven't done a lot, but I'm telling you, the fact that you're even here tells me that you've probably done some really amazing things. I think you need to write them down. You need to look at them. You need to praise yourself. You need to gas yourself up and be your biggest cheerleader. Stop comparing yourselves to other people, because comparison, as we all know, is the thief of joy. When you're out there trying to boss it in whatever career or profession you're in, you have to remember we're a minority in this country. So you're going to be comparing apples and oranges, apples and pears. What you need to be doing is you need to be comparing yourself from the self that you were yesterday, from last month, from last year, the last decade.
Yeah, it's too many minutes.
And just finally on this, the reasons why I think it's important for you to work through your imposter syndrome is because you're a human being of value and you have something to bring into this world. You are amazing. You need to see that. You need to see that you can just make it anywhere in any room. So just feel confident, learn that confidence in yourself and love yourself, and you'll be able to get through it.
Thank you so much, Natasha. We are running out of time. We will go to Q&A, but Baroness Young does have to quickly dash. So let's all just say thank you so much. No worries, thank you. And let's get quick Q&A from the audience.
So we've got one question that's been voted up 15 times. And it's great to see all female leaders are wearing their natural hair. Would you say being natural has affected your confidence during your rise to leadership?
Well, I'm not wearing my natural hair, so I'll go over to those that are.
No, it wasn't shade. It wasn't shade. It wasn't shade.
Well, a quick story about my natural hair journey. I used to wear braids all the time. I'd occasionally get weaves. And then my scalp started to get lots of like raised lumps, and it was painful and it was terrible. So I was forced in a way to sort of cut my hair, and I started wearing wigs. But when I say I was wearing wigs, this was back in 2014, 2013. I was not looking like this beautiful lady on the end. I'm telling you, it was like grandma's wigs. I was doing pupillage in grandma's wigs. And then I had a moment where things went bad for me at work. I was on a secondment and I got sacked from it. And it was a moment for me where I could have had a mental breakdown. I was already depressed prior to it, but I was just like, actually, I'm sick of this now. I've tried my hardest to be like you guys, and that hasn't worked. So I give up. I literally took off my wig. I went to a dinner that my old chambers had at the time, wigless, in a lime green dress, long gown, walked in. Everybody was looking at me like, who's she? Oh, wait, it's Natasha. I'm like, yeah, your forehead, big eyes. You can see me now. One guy came up to me, this like old Queen's, now King's Counsel, and he just went, Natasha, darling, you look fantastic. I hated that wig on you. You looked horrible. I was like, wow.
Well,
so for me, I think the natural hair journey the natural hair journey really helped me like just be and become myself. And yeah, so I don't necessarily think it's necessary. It's whatever you feel confident and comfortable with. Yeah. It took me a long time to feel confident and comfortable with my natural hair wrap because I was having braids on and off and on and off. I wasn't stopping. It was just constantly on. So when I started not having them anymore, I felt like I looked like a child, like I was ugly, etc. Going back to the whole having to look at myself in the mirror and realize that was really beautiful. Also, side note, having natural hair, I've had way more attention from the opposite sex. Wearing my wig, so
okay, let's get
it's worked well for me.
Let's get one more question.
One more question. Performatively black was recently used by a member of parliament. How destructive is that term for leaders and to dispelling the single black narrative?
Wow, let's hear from Tim first.
I think there's a lot of conversations at the moment that are quite destructive to the cohesiveness that we're trying to have, not only in our work environments, but more so our home environments. We've got to remember that this permeates into so many different levels. I think the right decision was done to take away the whip from individuals who want to castigate individuals into boxes. We aren't homogenous. We are individuals. We should be seen as human. But worse than that for me, and I don't want to make this political in any way, shape or form, because that's not what this conversation is about. When you have individuals who are gleefully happy about deporting individuals to Africa, I think we have to really ask ourselves a question about how far have we come really with race conversations in this country? And I think we should all really be checking what we're hearing, whether that be dog whistling or overt racism, in our conversations within our work environments, but also from what are supposed to be our political leaders. I don't think anybody should be having conversations about people's attitude based on their race or their gender or any other personal characteristic. I'm going to look at you as a human being and see how you react to me as a human being. I think the right decision was made, but I just think we have to be really cautious about what's going to happen over the next couple of years. As we find times are going to get very difficult, it's going to become really, really easy to try to unwind some of the great work that has been done around conversations about race and inclusion in workforces. Please be very aware that you have to see behind the rhetoric that is trying to be put out, and don't let that dehumanize the conversations, and try to take solace back from loving yourself, but more so standing up for others and being allies, because often we are part of conversations which are regularly negative, but we also have to ask ourselves, when have we stood up for somebody else? Now, I think it's really interesting that we have individuals of leaders who people will be saying, well, they don't really represent me. But you know what? They could be you next. It could be you next that somebody says that's the person. And who are you going to look for? As many of my Jewish colleagues will have from the poem, they came for me and nobody actually stood in that way. So we've just got to be really, really careful around not letting these conversations dehumanize us as individuals, as human beings.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you.